Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our tea party. I said that very gently. Welcome to the historic Capitol Theater, home of the Olympia Film Society and the 35th Annual Olympia Film Festival. Thank you for coming to our gay representation tea party. It is possible from our sponsors, Psychic Sister and Dumpster Values. They made all this possible. And we are also drinking tea, courtesy of Encore Chocolates and Tea. It's sunset in Olympia, and it's super delish. Now, let's get this conversation rolling. I want to go down the row and introduce ourselves and what we do. And also, I would like each of us to rate ourselves from 1 to 10 on the Kinsey scale. It's a joke, but do it.
I am Stacy Peck. I play the drums in some bands, and sometimes I make music videos, and I'm a barista. But mostly I would say that I am which one's whatever the gayest is.
10.
A 10?
I think it's a 10, right?
It's a 6.
Really? What?
A 7 on the Kinsey scale.
Hi, I'm Marianne Carter. I'm a visual artist and curator and events person from Seattle, Washington. I'm honored to be here and talk about some films. On the Kinsey scale, I guess I'm a know-it-all because I knew it was out of 6.
I'm Jonah Barrett. I am a gay filmmaker. Well, all of us are gay. I'm a filmmaker, and on the Kinsey scale, well, I thought it was 10. Okay, so I guess I'm still 10. There we go.
Hi, I'm Ricky German. I'm a costume designer, and I'm really excited to be here. These cookies are amazing. And I guess I'm a 5.
Hi, my name is Eliaichi Kamaro, and I am a storyteller, and I will learn whatever medium it takes to tell the story that's emerging. So sometimes it's film, sometimes it's visual art, sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's performance. And Kinsey scale.
That's perfect. My name's Danny Tayara. My pronouns are he, she, and they. And I am a filmmaker. I write and direct. And I do both documentary and narrative. So far, short films, but I have a web series that's in pre-production. It's still in the development stage, queer sci-fi web series. And honestly, I don't know much about where I would land on the Kinsey scale, but I'm pretty queer and in like all ways of gender and sexuality.
That's beautiful. Also, I love queer web series and I love science fiction. So yay, I'm excited about this conversation we're gonna have. So it says representation, gay representation in film on the title. And I think at this point, most of us know about the vitality of representation in film. It's like a social justice 101 class at this point, because we've been having this conversation for a couple years now. Like, I'm pretty sure we all learned representation mattered, that phrase, like in 2012 or something, or maybe not. So some of us might not know, though, why representation matters, so we should still talk about it. So I'm gonna ask this to everyone. What exactly does it mean to be represented in film, and why is it important? Fight.
I'll start.
Yes!
I think it's just really important to be able to see yourself on screen and feel like you identify with someone, not just physically, but also, like for me, it's exciting to see somebody like a queer character who's not coming out to their parents or isn't going to a drag performance, as like has more of a wide variety of experience in their life than kind of some of the cliches that get done a lot.
I think that art creates mimetic desire, and movies especially, like I noticed this after Trump got elected, actually, is that Hollywood immediately went to kind of advertising the fact that it was a dream factory. And since it got started in the 20s, it was kind of a chance for filmmakers to say, this is what we should dream about. And so if we're not seeing everyone represented in our dreams, then it's kind of, going to the movies becomes this kind of false medium. And so I think representation is important because it kind of allows us all to dream and kind of see each other's dreams.
I like that, and in that, like, that's how we build empathy, right, and compassion, when you're able to see your story reflected back at you from the screen or the stage or in a book. Like, when you see your story and your life and your struggle represented or like reflected back at you, you're reminded that you are here and you exist and your stories also matter. And I think it's really there's a piece in what you were just saying that I don't know if I can get to, but it's all about story, right? And stories are how we connect and how we find our shared humanity. And when certain stories are consistently left out or minimized or ignored or discounted,
Or told the wrong way.
or told the wrong way by people who aren't, you know what I mean? Like when other people like take it upon, I know we're going to get to that later, like when other people sort of take it upon themselves to tell stories of other people, but not from a completely informed point of view. I feel like it is a very easy way for us to discount and dehumanize each other, and dehumanizing is it's a slippery slope, because that's kind of where we're at now, where if you can dehumanize a group of people, it's easier to justify systematically mistreating them, and then you're going down a very scary road. So I think we need to see each other's stories. We all benefit when we see each other's stories.
I can speak a little bit, I think, to the definition of representation, if that's helpful. I would say that do people know what the Rousseau test is? Have you heard of that? Okay, the Rousseau test is something that was developed by GLAAD it's a nod to Vito Rousseau, and the test is sort of like the Bechdel test to determine if the film is actually, I might be butchering this, but queer enough by queer standards. So is the character, if there's a queer character in a film, are they three-dimensional? Are they a round character, and are they developed? And not just a side character, but someone that has a real personality and that is important enough to the plot that if you took them out, it would drastically change the film. And then also that they're explicitly queer, and it's not just with subtext and it's not just with coding, but they're queer, and you can identify them that way, but that's not all of who they are. They also have a bunch of other character development and personality traits. And I can also speak to why I think it's important, if that's...
Yeah, go for it.
I think that it normalizes queerness, so that particularly for young queer people, to see other queer people, represented in films in other jobs and in other industries, and I mean even just us being queer filmmakers, that alone is a lot. But also that the stories are representing queer adults, people who have grown up, and it's not just people who are committing suicide, or not just people who end up dying of AIDS or dying before they reach adulthood, but it's queer adults that have a future, and so queer young people are seeing the future that is actually possible for them.
I love that, you guys. Oh, that was a really good answer. Okay. So representation matters because there's not enough queer characters, of course. But I want to ask, were there any breakout characters you saw growing up where you did possibly feel represented? No. Okay.
All right, I'll go. Because I remember this on my walk today. Does anyone here remember the movie The Incredibly True Story of Two Girls in Love?
Yes.
Okay. So that was, for me, I had a girlfriend in 7th grade, and we dated for 7 years, and I had no context or framework for understanding the relationship I was in. And then I go see this movie, and it blew me away, because it was not just queer, but it was queer, and it looked like a relationship that I was in, and it was young, and then the situations that unfolded in that film were very, very, very close to what happened to me, and it was like, so it was just, I'd never experienced a film that felt that exposing and validating. And it was a very, very powerful moment of realizing the power of seeing your truth and your struggles and your reality reflected back at you. That really had an impact on me.
I kind of want to draw on something Danny said, and it's the idea of queer adults versus queer kids. I'm 30, which is not old for a person, which is old for a gay man. And I notice that people who are just a generation younger than me have a different experience. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I did not grow up with any of those characters, but just found one of those characters. And in lots of ways, I was like a gay child seeing this character and going like, oh, that's actually, it's the character Deron Horton plays in Dear White People. And this is a straight actor playing a gay man. I think he does a great job, actually. And it was a moment where I could lean over to my brother, who's always accepted me, and my mother, and say, this is what college was like for me. It was terrible. And this is exactly how I felt, that the gays, all of the gays that were, doing something were white. I did not fit in with them for multiple reasons. And that there were few black gays even on my campus. I mean, it was about as diverse as, well, Olympia, at 2% right there. And so it was interesting because it made me feel like a kid, but that I kind of got to say like, hey, look, that's me.
I feel like, to piggyback off the idea of kids in film, my two heroes that I identified with weren't explicitly queer, but both Matilda and Harriet the Spy possessed superpowers, and I didn't know that my superpower would be being able to go to Babeland and buy whatever size dick or 5 that I wanted, but there was something different about them, and I identified with that and felt a little bit like an outsider as a result.
As somebody I feel like I've always known that I was gay since I was little, and I always had crushes on little girls and stuff, and so I feel like I've always been trying to find people who I could identify with, and I really remember as a little kid being obsessed with Joe from The Facts of Life, but then later, when I really saw somebody in a movie who I felt like I connected with a lot, was the movie All Over Me, about some high school girls who want to play music with each other in New York and Hell's Kitchen, and they go and see helium play, but it's not helium because Alicia Haley's in the band. And then they're best friends, and they kind of have a relationship with each other, but one of the girls has a boyfriend and is kind of leading the other girl on, and it really was very similar to a lot of experiences that I was having, and I was like, it was always on HBO, like pretty late at night, and I would like watch it in the other room from my parents, like with the volume like just loud enough that I could hear it, but I knew no one else could hear it, and then I'd have like the remote so that if anybody walked in, it could change it like so fast. But I definitely, that was the first time where I was like, oh, I really identify with this. But before that, I was just like kind of looking for any character possible, like the kind of tomboyish friend, or if somebody had glasses on, or oh, she has short hair, or whatever, like anybody.
So it's sounding like we need a lot more queer characters in our storytelling in the world. So if you don't exactly feel represented in your media, what's the next logical step, you guys? As filmmakers, what would we do? What would we do?
Good question. I make movies.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was gonna say I relate to your story about the like trying to hide stuff from other people. I remember watching, like sneaking into my mom's room while she was at work to watch Ellen DeGeneres, and like hoping that she didn't come home for lunch. Or I remember also getting the L Word from like a DVD from the library. I don't know how they got it, but like a queer kid on Bainbridge Island finding that DVD in the library was so good. And I definitely hid it under my mattress. And okay, so back to your actual question. What do we do? I make movies, and I write myself into the films because, and I sometimes feel hesitant to do that because I don't know, I was socialized female, and so part of that means that I hesitate to take up space. But I ignore that, and I write myself into films anyway. And so the first time I saw an actual representation of myself in a film was when I made one. And I still have yet to see myself in any other film.
I just want to talk from the tech angle, because I think when we think about films, we always think about writers and directors, and really like so many people come together to make these characters pop and to make these experiences. I do a lot of theater, and you know, I'm collaborating with everyone, and so I want to see more queer people or people who understand how to tell these stories everywhere, and I want these conversations to be happening. The conversations that I have in a fitting with an actor are invaluable to that actor creating that character, to me understanding how to help that actor do what they need to do. And I don't know, I used to think that I had to go on stage or to be in front of the camera to make that happen, and I really enjoy my kind of supportive role.
I actually, what I want to I want to go off from the script a little bit, because what you brought up was really interesting, the confidence thing, the taking up space. Because I've noticed in a lot of queer creatives and women and just everyone who isn't a white man, basically, that they don't feel comfortable or confident enough taking up space. Do you also notice this, or did I just make that up? Like, yes? Yes? Okay. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It is a fact.
Okay, cool.
So I can speak from my experience. So I'm self-taught everything, self-taught filmmaker. And so I had the idea to make my film. So I made a documentary film about my dad's side of the family. So my dad is from Tanzania, my mom's from Korea. And when I started thinking about having kids, it occurred to me that it was going to be up to me to pass down everything to my future kid about what it means for her to be not just from Tanzania, but a member of the Chaga tribe. And even though I went back to Tanzania for like 12 summers growing up, I didn't really feel like I'd absorbed enough to actually have something tangible to pass down. So driving to work one day, it hits me in the span of a song, oh, that's what I need to do. I need to go back to Tanzania and I need to make a video so that I can show this to my future kid about this is what it means for you to be Chaga, right? But I didn't grow up with cameras. We didn't have phones at the time. It was in the 70s and the 80s. And like part of the problem with representation is the only people I knew who were filmmakers, people who made the films that I loved were like, you know, George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, and they were not me, right? For so many reasons, they were not me, but I love their movies, but they were not me, and they didn't represent me, but I still managed to enjoy the films. And but the notion that I would ever go off and make a film was totally never in my purview. Go off and make a film. 7 years I'm editing it, and I'm trying to tell the story about my dad for 7 years. And it's not until I do a screening and people are like, this film is lovely, but it has no heart. Like, we don't get your connection to this. Like, it looks beautiful, but I'm not feeling it. And so I was like, oh my God, 7 years, like, what the heck? And it occurred to me that I needed to put myself into the film. And after 7 years of going back and filming in Tanzania and no electricity and not knowing what we're doing and first-time filmmakers and finding editors, all of that, none of it, there was never a moment that was harder than me realizing that I had to somehow figure out a way to take up space with my story. That I wasn't telling my dad's story, I was telling my story. My dad was my vehicle into this story, but ultimately I was telling my own story. And believing that what I thought as a queer, mixed-race, first-generation American, middle-aged mom now, because I actually ended up having a kid and she was like 9 by this time, like middle-aged mom and a survivor, believing that I had the right to take up space with my story was the hardest part of my entire 8-year film journey. Because it's real, because I'd never seen anyone, I'd never seen a film that was made by someone like me or that featured someone like me or that was told by someone like me, but in answer to your question a couple of things back of in terms of what do we do then, it's sometimes you just have a story that's busting to come out and you just do it because you know that that story, you're going to tell that story anyway. You need to figure out a way to get it out into the world. And by doing that, you're going to open the doors to so many people who are coming behind you, right? You're going to, we can talk about that more later, but you just do it because you don't really have a choice. That story is coming. And we need to hear it,
My heart is swelling right now. That was amazing. Yes. Yes, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say that the question you just asked is a super central question in both of the projects that I'm working on right now. And I think one of them is a documentary specifically on rejection, my experiences with rejection of my authentic self, and then how queer community has been shaped by that rejection as well. And I think, and the web series I'm working on is also about queer space. What is it? What's its function? Why is it there? Why is it important? And I think for me to spend the last 2 to 3 years working on these projects that deal with that central question tells you how much that actually is a thing in my life, and everyone I talk to about it feels the same way. It's yes, I deal with that rejection all the time. I experience the aftermath of it, and the way that people navigate and function in the world differently because of it. It's huge, and it makes a big difference.
I just want to talk about the other side of the camera again, and I think it's the cultures that we create that allow these stories to come forth too. When you're on a film set or when you're backstage at a theater, the culture is kind of determined by the director, I would say we just worked on a film together, and the culture of, grips and lighters and all those people, it's like pretty boyish.
It so is. Oh my God.
And so we're standing there. It was great to get you in, and you were there for a week, but before that it was just like me and the boys. Which is, you don't say like, that dress is really dope. You say, and I mean, not that that's how straight boys talk. I love straight boys. They're great. They're wonderful. But it is that culture, and so there were times where I thought, like, maybe it's not okay to express yourself in this way. Maybe it's not okay to, we try to set up dressing rooms and like try to, have that culture permeate. And at a certain point, you do just kind of have to be like, well, this is what makes me amazing. So people are going to want to hear me talk like this, and people will want to hear me express myself like this. But I think so many times when we sit at that table or in a production meeting or something like that, that is when those identities get squashed too much to have them continue. It's the water cooler talk.
Have you ever been in a room full of straight people and you like make a gay joke and like none of them get it?
Oh, yes.
I know. It's, oh gosh. So I would like to discuss how queer creators, not characters, well, I guess characters too, but mostly queer creators, how we can break the mold of what we consider traditional storytelling. As LGBTQ creatives in film, what does your queer identity allow you to bring to the table that straight filmmakers might not? What are some alternative methods of storytelling you've seen pop up from queer minds?
I think what I bring to the table is the fact that I see the hegemonic culture from the outside. As a queer person, as a black person, and being able to go like, hey, wait a second, like this is not actually the only way to see this. And usually they turn to me and they're like, oh, how interesting. And it's great because it's not demeaning and it's not tokenizing. It's just me bringing my skills, the natural skills that were given to me that hurt at times, and being able to flip that around and be good at something. I think YouTube is really gay. I just want to put that out there. We're seeing, like when we talk about like primary sources when it comes to queer like expression, letters and things like that, I think we are in a really amazing time where 20 years from now when these little babies are grown up, they will be able to go and get those old YouTubes. All these coming out stories, all of these, my first this, those story times, you don't want to admit that you watch them, but you watch them. And it's primary source material. It's us preserving us. And I think that that's so gay.
I have kind of an aside that ties in. Well, so you brought up YouTube, and different media, which I think to start, like, queer people have already had to navigate being an other and like coming out and having a level of like self-love to do so. And so I think that allows us to disrupt social norms and the lens with which we show something. The YouTube coming out thing's really funny because I just remembered somewhere I have a video of me coming out to my dad where I say, Dad, I'm gay and I have a butt tattoo. And it's set to the soundtrack of Cowboy Take Me Away by the Dixie Chicks, which I just got gay married, and my dad proudly walked me down the aisle, and Stacy Peck's wife, Shane, played violin to Cowboy Take Me Away. I don't know, that connection was just really beautiful. But yeah, I think from the top down, like, queer people have to do things their way to get to be out in general, and it leads to hopefully a self-love and embrace and self-expression where we can do whatever the fuck we want, because like we can live our lives comparing ourselves in ways we don't fit in, or we can realize that we have no rules.
So one thing I want to talk about, one type of queer story, of course, Gay elephant in the room. Love stories. So one big aspect of being queer, of course, is who you love. I'm sure all of you have heard the phrase love is love from some mom on Facebook who posts one too many Huffington Post articles. But what if queer love is actually different from heterosexual love? Our relationships can take on different dynamics, right, than the traditional man-woman binary. How does this translate when we write scripts with queer love stories? And do any possibly heteronormative traits still float up? Or perhaps, is it true that love is just actually love?
I think that the love is love thing is the most, it's a reduction. It's true, love is love, and it's a way that people can like make queerness palatable without actually having to dive into it. So I think there's a lot untold by that statement, and I feel like in cinema, or kind of in life in general, I feel like a queer story, the ending is a choose your own adventure, and a straight story is a happily ever after.
Okay, this is shitty, but after doing this for 10 years, I kind of came to the conclusion that truth is not, there are no universal truths, and that truth is really relative. And so while I do think love is love, I think that's not why we make movies, and it's not why we speak to each other. And so what I love that maybe queer movies, and I mean especially queer movies, like not the umbrella term, but like, you know, people who are making movies that are devoid of some of our gender roles and things that we've built up in this society, are kind of exposing some of our toxic behavior. I think when we see a relationship between two men, we start to talk about what the culture of men is, and what's bad about it, and what's difficult about it. And when straight men come to watch gay men fall in love, what might they learn, or what might they see about what it means to be a man as well?
I think that everybody is very unique, and for each individual, there's so much wrapped into what your sexuality is, and how you use it, so for the idea that any one couple is the same as another or experiences that relationship the same, I don't believe that. And I think the unique thing in particular about queer relationships and the way that I'm allowed to write them is that, and the way that I live my queer relationships is that all of those norms and traditions that come with heteronormative relationships are deconstructed, and then we get to reconstruct the relationship how we want. And some of those traditions do kind of sneak their way in, but when we realize that, we look at it, we analyze it, we name it, and then we figure out, okay, do we like that, or should we get rid of it? Yeah, like I said, I live that, but I also get to write it into my stories. So I think that queer relationships may or may not be similar to others, and there might be, similarities between queer relationships and straight relationships, but I don't think any one relationship is the same.
Right on. Do you have something to say?
I actually have a question.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Could you pass the tea down here?
Oh, do you want this one? Yeah, okay. No, you guys, this has been so healing. Like, I've been holding my tongue on Love is Love for so fucking long. Like, it's great. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about monsters now. Completely 180 from Love Story. We all went like, yeah, fuck yeah, monsters. So there's a history with gays of identifying with the villain of films, sometimes because they're queer-coded, sometimes not. I don't know about you guys, but a large majority of gays that I know loves horror movies and sci-fi. That's basically speculative fiction, stuff with really fucked up monsters and outcasts, things like that. So have you experienced this, and why do you think gays might root for the monster?
Just in the interest of conflicts of interest, I should preface this by saying that I am a villain. My entire aesthetic has been influenced greatly by Cruella de Vil and Ursula.
Oh my God, I see it.
But yeah, I've always fallen in love with villains because, I mean, they are more fashionable. That's cliche to say, but it's true, and it's because they're like fierce and unhinged, and they're like fighting against rules, and it's not, you can say that it's evil that is the byproduct or the product of that, but the byproduct is figures like Ursula and Cruella de Vil, who are matriarchs of their own empires that are like being followed around by like dumb men that do whatever they want. So I found that really inspiring as like a young femme that didn't see myself in other things. I, of course, I sympathize with the protagonists, but there's just something fabulous about villains.
I love that you mentioned Cruella de Vil because for the 101 Dalmatians, that live action one in the 90s, I grew up with that one. Anthony Powell did the costumes. And it's that she does everything, and she's brazen, and there's a character that I identify with. And he gave her leather and boots and heels and fur and all of this wonderful stuff to tell everybody to fuck off in. And that is what you want to do as anybody, but especially as a queer kid. You want to come to high school, you want to be like, these are my boots, this is my fur, here's my cape. Fuck you. And then leave. And villains kind of have the courage, no matter what they're fighting for, to do that. But also in spite of everybody rooting against them. And that does take courage.
I would also say gays have been villainized. And to the extent that they've been blamed, we've been blamed for natural disasters and for diseases. And so I think if we're going to be villainized, we might as well enjoy it and find something fun in that. And there is something kind of fun about having like all restrictions. It's like if you're gonna name us a villain, like what's the point of trying to be good or trying to be nice? And I would also say that, because we're associated have been associated as villains, we know that we're not bad. We're not inherently bad. And so I think there's something that we see also in villains that's like, not to excuse their behavior, but there's something made them that way.
Yeah, I think when straight people watch 101 Dalmatians, they think about the puppies, and when queer people do, we think about the underdog. That was a pun. Sorry.
No, that's totally true.
This is exactly what straight people think we do. Tea parties and down in them over 101 Dalmatians.
I've never seen 101 Dalmatians.
What?
I'm kind of.
Which
no.
one?
I've never seen any of them.
Any of them?
No.
Well, this table obviously is not for you.
I think I'm too basic to be on the table. It's okay.
Marianne, you know what to do. So, speaking of straight people, while the queer experience, and that's with a KW, the queer experience isn't everyone's experience, why might it still be important for everyone to digest queer content? What might a straight person gain from viewing a gay film?
A boner. if anyone else wants to go, they can. But I do, in all seriousness, think that, well, it's important, queer people and other marginalized communities have spent so much time off screen that I think that any efforts to get them on screen, us on screen, is important. I think, and I mean, we talked earlier about how representation helps queers and how seeing your story and telling your story is important, but also like it provides access, and especially in a country that's so politically divided, and we talk about bubbles, like you can expose people to new ideas through film without actual physical proximity, and I think that's important.
So much to say all the time. I would say I really hope that someday we don't have to ask this question or have to answer this question. And in all seriousness, I have been asked this question, like, what's the point of a lesbian bar? What's the point of having gay bars? Do you really think that we need the Seattle Transgender Film Festival? Yes, actually we do, and it's really important that we have queer space. I think that, I don't want queer people and folks, marginalized people, to have to constantly prove their value or prove their worth. But there is a lot of value and there is a lot of worth in us. I think that by watching queer content and content that's from a different perspective, we learn more about our fellow humans and we connect with them, and it's an authentic representation of the queer community, so that straight people aren't just like existing in an echo chamber to serve their own needs. I don't know. That just sounds like a sad world.
Can I bitch for a second? Yeah. Okay. See, you have a lot to say, and I have a lot of bitching. So I'm also the marketing director here, and a couple weeks ago we had this queer singer, pop singer. Her name is Jen Champion, and she's your friend, right? She is so cool, and so sometimes I have to market to Reddit. And I was like, queer musician Jen Champion is coming, and like all these people were like, why do you have to like let us know that like she's a queer musician? It shouldn't matter either or, whether or not she's queer or not. And it was just like the most thing. And so that just kind of reminded me when you were telling me about like why do we need lesbian? We need these spaces, and we need signifiers to let people know, like our fellow queers know, like, hey, this thing's coming. And actually, a lot of queer people came to that thing. There were a lot of snapbacks.
That actually, just a minute.
I wish I brought my drum set so I could do the thing.
Oh my gosh! Wait,
That's how I could have come in handy here.
take these spoons.
Okay, cool.
Okay, you're ready.
Next time I'm on it. Will you say that again?
There were a lot of snapbacks.
That's awesome. Okay, so I can't follow that up with anything witty, but thinking about that, like, when I've been traveling around and talking about my film, which has been out now for about 6 years, and I'm here because of it. I'm so grateful. But I always talk about how I'm a queer, mixed race, first generation American filmmaker, right? Because I want the audience to know that that's the perspective, that's the lens that I'm bringing to the story that I'm telling. And this story, as I mentioned, like now radically centers my own experience, my own journey going back to Tanzania to learn more about my cultural roots. Because it centers me, it centers everything that I am, right? I bring all of myself to that story. And even though there's nothing overtly queer in the film, there's nothing about relationships, there's nothing that reads as queer, it is really, really important to me that people know that this is a queer story. right? Because queer people have many different experiences. They have family back in Tanzania. They have family also in Korea. They're trying to figure out what that means for their babies and their partners who are also straight men, and what is that? I'm like, it's queer. It's a very queer story, you know? And so I feel like even though a lot of times when I would try to sort of market it to queer film festivals, they'd be like, there's nothing queer about this. I'm like, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Like, you know, like, and so I would try to explain to them that actually it is a very, very queer film. It's informed by my queer politic. It is infused by my queer relationships and my queer community, because you don't see, you know, like, you know, it's just, we need to be thinking more expansively about what the queer experience means and looks like, and to allow for multiple frameworks and lenses and stories to be included in, like, I don't know, the kind of queer experience, I think. But yeah, but that's why I identify as a queer filmmaker, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have something?
I have something to say. I'm not.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I'll go through a whole like Netflix queue of the LGBT movies or whatever, which they actually took off. There's not a section anymore.
You mean like all 5 of them?
Yeah. But anyway, so I'll be going through it. I'll be trying to watch them, like struggling through. And I've noticed a lot, like more and more, I'm like, who are these for? Like, I don't feel like they're for me. I feel like they're for my parents, or like to understand what it's, to make them feel comfortable and not to make me feel comfortable, and I don't understand. So I think it would be important for the general public to see more movies that are made for queer people, about that they would enjoy, and not like about, here's how you might tolerate us, or...
Are you talking about Jenny's Wedding?
Yes, exactly.
That
That's like
movie
a whole
sucks.
genre.
Yeah.
And also, like, this isn't aside from that, but so many movies are called stuff like In Her Mouth, or like the Fish on Flowers Bay, or I'm just like, are you trying, like, do you want me to watch any of these? It's like really rough. I don't know, and maybe like that's like something people are looking for. Like, maybe that's like, I don't know, 100 and Dalmatians thing that like I don't know about. But I just feel like there's not a lot. I don't understand who a lot of the movies are for. And if it's like somebody's parents are like, oh my God, I'm so glad you showed me like Katherine Heigl getting married. In this person, I don't know. That's a terrible movie. Don't ever watch that movie.
It's so bad, you guys.
You should watch it.
I feel like you touch on the seriousness of and like overwrought nature of the names. Like, is it interesting because it does tie into it? Because I think people think like, so you want to be queer, you should be serious about it. And I mean, in case you guys haven't noticed, I'm a very serious person, so I identify with that stereotype. No, but there needs to be like, straight people should watch movies about like just normal queer lives, is what you're saying, and they can be funny, and they can. There needs to be more representation. I don't know. This all goes back.
I think it's really tough though, because a lot of the representation we see, especially on Netflix, movies, which, I mean, let's be honest, I'm that honesty person. Like, let's be honest, we all drink during the day sometimes. Hi, I'm Ricky, and I have a problem with queer movies on Netflix, but I look at them and I go, oh, this is a queer story from a very gay place. Like, here's a queer story that centers the gays in West Hollywood. What's that one, Cherry Pop, with all the drag queens that we know in it? And
I was thinking of the Eating Out movies.
oh, those are great too. And you're looking at it and it's like, who are these white gays that are like basically straight and all very beautiful looking in a very LA sort of way, like they're all waxed and tan and their teeth are very white. And that doesn't look like our A gays here. You know, that doesn't look like the A gays of Pennsylvania or the A gays of Ohio, if there are any A gays in Ohio. But it's that kind of thing. Like I've seen, I think some of the movies tend to represent an actual queer or gay story, but they're just not our gay story. And Netflix is just such a poor example of what that gets to be.
I feel like that's like a certain genre, like a subgenre of the LGBT section, like bad LA cis white gay.
Well, or, I mean, I look at it this way, movies that are explicitly gay for that niche market that have enough money to go to the place, I mean, like, you know, really doing films as a business. And while there are lots of queer people in the business, we're not necessarily, it's like, what did they say about women? If there's a woman's name attached to a project, it's like 50% less likely or 90% less likely to get funded. So like, I mean, what you're looking at is the people who made it, oddly enough, which is sad, actually. But, you know, I don't watch those movies with so much disdain, but I just don't get a whole bunch from them.
That's true. I wish they could like act in those movies as well. I'm just saying. So how do we feel about straight people writing queer characters? We all saw Call Me By Your Name, right? Is there something lost when this happens? Or what about straight actors playing queer characters? Grab it, grab it.
Okay. I'm back. I think this goes back to the nature of our medium. And we see this, like coming from a theater background, everything's like a little soupy, a little loosey-goosey. You see it from 12 feet away most of the time. And so the nature of our medium, and there's that inherent suspension of disbelief. There are things that are built into our medium to help it be a little fuzzy. And when we go to see a movie, we want to see absolute realism. And so sometimes people apply these rules to the movies, and it just doesn't really work. That being said, there are times where I don't feel like it's terrible. I would like to say like, oh, well, all the time, you should have this. But I'm looking at this young straight man, for all I know, who's playing this character in Dear White People, and I don't hate his representation, and I think that lots of times, it's about, like, you'd have to ask a fully out, like, gay actor to act like he's not out yet, and then to also be real awkward on camera until he figures it out in the end. And I'm not saying that he can't do that, but also maybe there is a little tiny bit of truth for some of these roles. And I hate to say that. I really hate to say that, because what I want to say is I think only gay people should play gay people. But I think that there are moments for, I mean, what I'm not endorsing is Matthew Perry playing a man who is a gay best friend who just wants to not actually have sex with that woman and give her a baby.
Did that happen?
Yeah. Oh. What is that movie? My best 3 weddings in
Friends.
Friends. It's something. It's something. There are tons. Like in the 90s, we saw that a whole bunch. I think Rupert Everett was the only gay man playing a gay man once in a while, and he was talking about how it's so deep. He's playing Oscar Wilde in his last, movie ever. But like, he was the only kind of out gay actor in Hollywood. It's still a super taboo for that to happen, because you damage your credibility as a straight person ever, and we know that we only go to see love stories with straight actors playing straight people, because that's what acting's all about. So yeah, I don't know. I think I just want to play devil's advocate and say that if our medium is about expression and empathy, that it is possible sometimes to have this work.
I kind of agree. I would say
Ooh, you guys.
if a casting director can't find a queer person to play a queer character, they're not looking hard enough, because there are queer actors out there who want to do this. And I think, like anything else in a film, production design, everything, cinematography, the lighting, the sound, every single thing in a film is an intentional choice. So if you're going to cast a straight person into a queer role, make that an intentional choice and have an answer when I ask, why did you choose to do that? And it better be really good.
Do you think the director matters as well? It's like if it was a gay director casting a straight person as a gay character. Did I say that right? Probably.
Like if it's a gay director
Yeah.
casting a straight
Yes.
person.
There we go.
Does it matter?
I mean, does that change it at all? 'Cause,
I think it's the same answer. I think if you're gonna do that, make sure it's intentional. Just don't do it out of ignorance or out of just convenience. Because again, there are queer people out there who want to play those roles, and I think there are some instances where it would make sense to cast a straight person in those roles. Sure, why not?
Or at least it'd be easy. I'm not saying that makes sense. That's different.
But it's not, and for some people it's an issue of access. Like for me as a queer director, maybe I just don't have the money to, host another casting call or another audition or what have you. Or if I don't have the time and, there's this really great actor that wants to act in my movie, and if it's going to get made, it's going to get made now, and maybe that's my last choice. And as a queer person, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of money, and so I'll probably do that. I really hope not to, but I probably would. The issue, I think, is more with access. If money went more toward developing space for these people to actually engage with the industry and not having the water cooler attitude on film sets, I think it would be a lot easier for queer people and trans people to access the space. So there's a whole world of things that we could do differently, and it can't always be perfect, but we can try.
I think a good example of that is what we're seeing on Pose. That's such a good show. It's such a good show, and it's so good for lots of reasons. And there's a situation where the gay man running the writing room is the writer. He's a black gay man, but everyone else in the writing room is trans. And so, and it's just for the sheer fact that they're not all writers. Simple. Janet Mock is on that show. It's really amazing, but what you see is a whole bunch of wonderful, when I saw this show, it's like, why am I not seeing these people in more stuff? They're amazing. The level of acting on that show is miles ahead of any show on TV right now. But you can tell that they're all stage actors. And this is another thing is when you become an actor, it's a business. And so how are you going to market yourself, and how are you going to tell people what you do? And so when it comes to looking for those leads, you might have to pull from a different place. They deliver these lines like Shakespeare, and it's gorgeous. If you haven't seen Pose, you should watch it twice. It's so good. The costumes are good. The hair and makeup is good. It's an all-black trans cast, essentially. And it's on a major network, and they are slaying every word. And it's heartening to hear us talk about the 80s, which is that's when history in schools stop. we stopped talking about our history then, and it's silly because it's the time that we need to talk about the most. It's why what's happening now is happening, and we're seeing this being told on TV by the people who we wouldn't think would be telling this story. It doesn't have to be the Wolf on Wall Street story. It can actually be the story about the people at the bottom of the totem pole, and they're telling you what it was, and it's just great. But that too.
No, I think that's another thing, actually, besides my questions, I'd like to talk about. TV versus cinema. I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of more gay shit on TV than there is in the movies. Do you guys agree with this? Or has it been like that until about right now? What do you think? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I think because of the lack of representation, queer people and the lack of money and people willing to put out things by queer people, that's why, like you said, YouTube is the shit, and why people are doing web series and things like that. Like we found different ways to get things out there, and now that's become popular, so that's turning into TV, which is really awesome, because it's like, even though we didn't have the same like resources as everyone else, that people still wanted it so much that now you're forced to put it on TV for people to be able to see, and I think that's super inspiring.
I think it's really challenging when we talk about representation. We also have to talk about exploitation, and when that door opens up, that door doesn't just open up for you to be represented. Sometimes that door opens up for people to take advantage of your identity and to exploit your identity. What was it? I realized TV was gay when I saw Johnny Weir and Tara Lipinski.
Oh.
Come on, reluctant gay diva. Like, where did you come from? And she's like slightly older, and they're hosting the Olympic figure skating together. And I was like, oh, what an interesting choice. Who are you marketing to? Oh, me. Well, I'm here. But I think that we are seeing a lot more of it. Maybe we're seeing it in the form of, Modern Family, where there are these couple of gay dads that don't represent all of us, but again, like for our mothers, it's like, oh, being gay is okay. I saw those two gay dads. You're gonna be just fine.
Do the thing.
Yes. But there is a great, I feel like what you're asking is it real? What is the representation that we're seeing on TV right now? Is it real?
We can go to the next level.
Well,
Let's
let's
it.
go.
Is it real?
Is it real? And I think some of it is, and a lot of it isn't. And what we kind of have to talk about is how do we establish more of the stuff that is, so the stuff that isn't doesn't hurt so much when we see it. Modern Family hurts a lot.
I feel like also if you do that, I think it's a sign of progress, but it's not a sign of like a finish line where, there's a series with 12 episodes. I'm thinking like Black Mirror had their like San Junipero or whatever, like lesbian episode, which made me be like, oh, Black Mirror is so gay. But really it's like, no, like one out of however many episodes is. And like, I guess that one was kind of centered around queer people, but you can make like one episode feature one character, which is 1/6 of a show, which is 1/12 of a season, and it's a lot less commitment than, one of 6 leading actors in a film.
Or RuPaul's Drag Race on VH1, and you're sitting in the locker room, and your straight buddies are talking to you about which drag queen they're rooting for, and you're like, you know about that? And it's also sad because RuPaul's kind of like an aging here's something that's interesting to see an aging homosexual man saying things that aren't great a lot of the time. And we are supposed to disagree with him in public. But he's our only representation on VH1. And so it's hard. I think it's very hard. It's a weird climate to have this. And I just kind of want to see what the next step looks like. Because it seems like representation comes and then it goes away. We had the same characters we did in the 80s. We had the same characters we did in the 90s. And then they're going to go away when TV is tired of us. And then we'll get the same characters for our kids. It's kind of sad. Yeah.
Well, let's not end it on a sad note. I want to end on a positive note, actually. I mean, there'll maybe be time for questions, I'm not sure. But my last question, how have queer stories helped you? And why is it important that we keep creating these tales? Or I guess telling our stories.
I think that honestly, I think I've seen more queer films than I have non-queer films. As somebody who has...
That's amazing.
As a young person, I was fortunate enough to go through the Real Queer Youth Program, which is a queer youth filmmaking camp for teens. And so from 16 on, I was watching good queer films and learning how to analyze them and engage in media literacy and theory. And from there, went on to program for the Seattle Queer Film Festival and the Seattle Transgender Film Festival. And so a lot of the films that I've watched are queer and trans, good and bad. And even the bad ones, I get a lot of inspiration from watching other films in general, but especially queer films. Ideas for my own films and ideas for what to do or not to do. And I was just thinking about this the other day because I'm making a treatment for my documentary, and I'm writing down what films is this film gonna be like? And they're all queer, save for maybe one that's like 13th. But there was something really powerful about that like all of the films that inform, almost entirely all the films that inform my filmmaking style and approach and technique are queer. So it's like this meta level of queer. And also filmmaking just makes me happy, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy the family that I get to create on my film sets, and making films with other people and then being able to share them also. It's just this level of connection that really I live for.
That's so inspiring. I love that. I love that, like, you've seen more queer films than not. As someone who's pushing 50, like when I was younger, like there just was, I did not, I'm sure there've always been out there, but I did not have access to a lot of queer films. So when I set out to make my film, I really was charting my own course. And in some ways, maybe it was a good thing, because I wasn't sort of prematurely pigeonholing myself into a certain way that my story had to be told or what it would probably have to look like. I was just telling the story that was coming, and it came out looking not like anything I'd ever seen. But now, I have a 12-year-old kid, and she's just growing up in a very, very different environment where her world is necessarily queer because of her mama, and her exposure to queer life and queer culture and queer media is very, very different from what mine was like growing up. And I don't know. I think our world only gets better. You know what I mean? Like the more we contribute our stories, like we just create a more expansive and inclusive portrait of humanity, and we all benefit from that, you know? So I'm all for getting those stories out there.
We're going to the line. Okay. What's the question again?
How have queer stories helped you?
World peace. Really, honestly, the best queer stories that I've seen are documentaries. And I think what I've loved is seeing that we can have a sense of history. And looking back on these people and living in lots of times like more oppressive environments than I live in currently, and they didn't just all die. You know, they didn't give up. And I was watching this documentary called The Queen. It's 1968. It's about drag queens in Manhattan and the ballroom scene and how it fractured between white and black. And it's that famous, this is the actual backstory to the famous meme where Crystal LaBeija says, Harlow is not better than me. You know, she's not more beautiful than me. Where are all the true beauties? And it's beautiful to see these men getting together in private, under the radar, to do this thing that's been happening. Balls have been happening for hundreds of years. And, you know, when somebody doesn't understand who you are, to be able to point back and say, like, look, we've been doing this for a long time. Just let us breathe is pretty awesome. So, yeah.
I think it's relaxing to have an opportunity to like enjoy media without having to do the mental gymnastics of like, am I Leonardo DiCaprio or am I Kate Winslet? Or both in Titanic or whatever. So seeing representations of yourself makes it easy, and also like finding out new ways to use peaches.
Nice. As a 40-year-old lesbian drummer from Iowa, queer stories were like, I don't know where I would be right now if I hadn't watched like literally every shitty movie that I could possibly get my hands on, because there wasn't anyone who I could see around me who was like me or who I thought I was gonna hang out with, or like, so like that was like who I was like, oh, maybe one day I'll do this like dumb thing. Like even the movie Go Fish, I remember really identifying with that movie too, even though I was like, God, this movie sucks. But it also was really, really good. Like I don't know. I felt that way about so many movies. I was like, I hate this movie so much, but I've seen it 10 times and I'll probably watch it again, just because I needed it so much. And I'm so glad that things are getting better, and you're like, oh, I only watch queer movies, and I'm like, how? But because I'm just not used to them being good. Or I think maybe at a certain point I like kind of gave up on it, or I don't know where to find the good ones, or I'm being lazy about it. But that makes me so happy, like that you were able to go to a queer filmmaking thing when you're 16. Like that's amazing. Like. So I think that I'm glad that they exist, and I'm glad that everybody knows about good movies, and you should tell me where they are.
Okay, we're over time, but I don't give a shit. I'm running this show. Let's take some audience questions, if you be so kind. Yes, you in the back.
Just a couple questions. One is, if you move to the villain role, is that kind of a victimization? You know, if you default to the victim role? And second, where do your films fit on the Kinsey scale?
Who wants to take a crack?
The victim role is not a role. I just want to say that. We make movies about people, and we present people on screen, And so just because something bad happens to you and you're suffering doesn't mean that it makes you any less of a person worth. I flesh those characters out harder most of the time because I don't understand them. And I have to go to the depths to help me understand them. Because sometimes you have to costume characters you don't like. You know, one of the characters that I have to costume in this next show is a young white man with no cares in the world. He plays a plantation owner. I don't know what that feels like, and my instinct and my gut is not going to be with me on that one. But I have to find the reality in that. So I don't know. I mean, I guess in answer to your question, I don't think that the victim role is necessarily one that deserves pity, but our extreme compassion. Same way we identify with a hero. And I would say that because I'm a queer person, all of the things that I do are queer. So probably a 6 on the Kinsey scale.
All right, let's take another question from a gay person.
I'm a gay person.
Oh, okay, I think this gentleman raised their hand first, and then we'll go to you.
Okay. So, I think from listening to your conversation, the problem of representation is twofold. So, there are gatekeepers in a certain culture in the larger filmmaking community that is sort of exclusive to queer people, but also the queer people who are creators feel conflicted and that it's difficult for them to take up space in their own creation. So, as people who have done that and have really put themselves out there, what do you think of as your responsibility in welcoming other queer people to being creators, being encouraging, being inspiring? What do you view as your role in that?
I've had a lot of great mentors, and so I feel like I know what has helped me and what has not helped me, what makes a good mentor and what doesn't. And after I graduated from that youth program, I went on to manage it. So for 4 years, I was revamping the curriculum and then teaching workshops to queer youth. And that was amazing, and I wish everybody could do it, and I wish everybody had that access. And I no longer work for that organization, but I try to, friends always are telling me, hey, if you need an extra hand on your production, let me know, because I would love to help out. I just want to get into whatever you're doing and learn about it because it looks really fun and cool. And so so many people to the point where I just kept forgetting, and then next time I had a film production, I just forgot. So I started a list, and now I'm adding names to it. Every time someone says that, I'll put their name there, and next time I have a film shoot, I'm gonna contact all of them.
No playing this crabs in a bucket thing. And we do it as marginalized people. And so when you see somebody struggling next to you, you have to help them. But we don't help them because we think that our helping them is going to make us look bad in front of the people we're trying to impress who aren't marginalized. And this is so tough in our industry and in the world. You're at the office and you can't talk with this gay person like you'd like to, because then those people will see you being vulnerable with this person in a certain way, and so, and we just have to help each other, I think, too.
I think helping each other is key, right? For me, My focus has been on making sure, especially as a self-taught filmmaker and artist, like, I believe that anyone can do it, like completely 100%. And so one of the things that I did, and so what I do is I travel around and I talk to people about why the world needs your story. I did a TED Talk about it, like why the world needs your story. Like, and I do whatever I can to support people in finding their own creative way to tell their stories. And so in Seattle, I helped develop at the Seattle Documentary Association, the Works in Progress program. And I facilitated screenings and feedback sessions so that people could get feedback on their film and to help them take it to the next level. And the culture that I was trying to cultivate in that organization, and I think it's really caught on, is when you rise, we rise. Right? So there's not the sense of, because in the film world and in the art world, there is a lot of reluctance to share resources or access to, like, grants or opportunities or filming opportunities, because, like, there's this feeling of, like, scarcity, right? And so I'm just trying to bust through that and say, like, if someone's film breaks out and premieres in Toronto or Hot Docs or SIP or whatever, like, the entire Seattle documentary film community elevates as a result, right? And so, like, it's just, there's no need for scarcity. There's no need for ambition at someone else's expense. We just need to do what we can to support each other and telling the best possible stories, because that's what I really believe in. So for me, it's all about sort of taking what little leverage I have and making sure that I am opening doors for other people to tell their stories to the best of their ability.
Okay, you're on. Last question.
Oh my God, the pressure's on.
No.
So, I am much older than everyone. Ricky, when you said you're 30 and you feel like you're old, I mean, when you're my age, you're invisible.
Absolutely.
You are absolutely invisible.
I want to ask you,
in the gay community.
how do you feel about this daddy conversation?
One of the things that I want to say is, when you talk about movies, they're a business. One of the things that I see is that most of the gay characters that are presented to me are not presented to me. They're presented for the straight audience. They have to be acceptable. So, as young filmmakers starting out, it's all about money, right? I mean, what I want to know, can you get the funding out there to make a movie that's all gay? And I would encourage you to not worry about characters that are safe or that are geared towards the straight audience. I can't come up with 5 films that I've seen in my lifetime that I feel like really represent me and who I am. So I would just like to encourage y'all. I mean, I love this, and I would encourage y'all to please don't. I mean, I know in business you have to compromise, but as far as your stories and your characters, please don't compromise.
Thank you. But also thank you because you're an older person telling me to get my zhuzh, and that does not happen.
You're still a chicken to me.
But also, the business part is something I think we don't talk about a whole bunch, and I mean, I'm more into the soft end of it. I'm sure there are people up here who could tell you about going to movie markets and what that's all about. But
can I ask you, Ricky, do you think that's why some directors have to choose straight actors to play gay men?
it's definitely a game of distribution,
because that actor is going to bring the straight audience into the film.
Absolutely. So the idea that we're talking about it in theater right now, like the idea that only, like black plays are only for black people. And, you know, what does this look like to be able to have, like, oh, nobody's gonna like that because it's so niche-y. But then I look at a movie like Moonlight, you know, which was another time, you know, when that kid finds those moments where his sound just goes away, and I was immediately like, oh yeah, that is something very distinct. It was a play first, and so in the era of YouTube and our global like society, there are more opportunities to get your stuff out there and show people that it's popular. It's not perfect, but like there are those rare situations where something blows up, and it's really amazing. But I think we also have this idea that you go to Hollywood, you write a movie, and then it gets made. And like Moonlight being a play, so basically they effectively toured that around the country before it became like, oh, maybe we should option this to be a movie. So it's a process. It's a process that is, you know, what you're seeing, and I think when you look at the bios of people, what you're seeing is the part where they started being real successful, and they're telling you it was a race to the top, but really you're just seeing the top end of the race. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure somebody else could probably offer more.
I mean, I don't make movies, but I make music videos. And the first probably 15 videos I made with my phone. And they got seen just as much as videos that people spent a lot of money on. And because they had a good amount of creativity, and they were interesting to watch. So I don't think that having a lot of money necessarily means that more people are going to see it. Like there's tons of huge budget movies that are complete trash that no one ever watches. So I don't know if that's something that I really even consider that much, as far as like, if it's not, especially like from my perspective of being more involved in music, I feel like the more money gets brought into something, the more it kind of sucks and isn't fun anymore. So I guess I just think it's possible to do things that are really interesting and that a lot of people can appreciate without them having to be really expensive.
Yeah, I think I'm also not a filmmaker, but as an artist, I make very gay stuff. But I think what we all have in common is we work for ourselves. And I think the question is, if we can't sustain ourselves and be happy, or not even happy, but like make ends meet, sustaining ourselves and our work and our practice, and are forced to work. If I have to go design t-shirts for Urban Outfitters because not enough, you know, mine aren't successful enough, like that's when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to make straight geared stuff until I have this fund to then create my stuff again. And so I guess just knowing the mechanisms of how things get made and how people are successful. If you enjoyed the content here tonight and want to know how you can help queer cinema thrive, support like people from the bottom up. Like going and buying a ticket at a show that anyone here is involved with, like that one number could actually make a difference in a way that, you know, once Call Me By Your Name was like at Regal, it didn't matter. And also, of course, it was made by a straight person. But anyway, this is like kind of a tangent, but people always want to know how they can see things continue and prosper and more authentic voices. And so support marginalized people directly. It makes a huge impact.
Especially when you have the chance to, because the other thing about film is it's a collaborative medium, And so, just because you've got this wonderful gay filmmaker and a gay writer and all this stuff, doesn't mean that their producers are going to be also queer. And so, at a certain point, and I think, we're probably seeing more people come into the fold, in those ways, but I mean, you need just all types of people to make a movie, and I mean, let's talk to allies. When you go to see that shitty movie that they think is going to sell, and you're sitting there supporting it, and you're saying, this is art, I'm gonna give my money to it, you're also sending a message. So, I mean, I'm not saying don't go see it, but maybe I'm saying don't see it. See that little wonderful thing instead, because it does, people are looking at that stuff. The people who count the coins are looking at that stuff, and the people who are counting the coins are not the people at this table who you love.
I think that I say this with a little bit of reservations because I would love to pay everyone on my crew and cast what they're worth, and I just don't have enough. But I think the one nice thing about people who are willing to work on a project for little to no money is that everybody has some kind of personal stake in it, and they really care about the project. And so I think that is why sometimes our projects, while low funded, are really impactful and have a soul in them that some films don't, some of the bigger budget films don't. And yeah, as far as how we get funding, I don't personally know where I'm gonna get funding for my next projects. I have no idea what I'm gonna do in a few months to make ends meet, but I don't know, I'm just doing it. And I know that I could apply for grants. There are grants out there that I could apply for, and I could do crowdfunding. I think one difficult part about that is just feeling, again, like I have to constantly prove myself and prove my value and prove why this is important. And it feels like I explain that all day long. And so it gets really tiring. And so I just haven't applied for any grants. I can't even bring myself to sit down and type it out because I don't feel like I should have to. But eventually I will, and it'll probably get funded. And the last thing is, I just wanted to say thank you for saying that, because it feels really nice to hear somebody say, like, keep doing what you're doing.
Okay, everyone, it's time. I just want to thank all the people for coming here, all our panelists. Oh my gosh, yay! I want to thank Rob for putting this together. He invited everyone. I want to thank Mike for putting up with me and my weird ideas, Genevieve for setting all this up, and I want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. Thank you so much. Stay gay.
Thank you.